Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Sheridan's live stream service, coming to you on Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to everyone. It's also the summer solstice, so lots to celebrate. Please send in announcements, and we will go ahead and make any announcements that might come through. There's always the Zoom fellowship, everyone meeting up after the service, so there's that opportunity. Links are in the order of service email. And I'll go ahead and get into opening words while any other announcements come in. Okay. Opening words today, we have Call from Beyond by Reverend Susan Magan. From beyond the playful summer clouds, beyond the earth's thin blue line, from beyond the bright moon and meteor showers, we hear the call to look and listen carefully, to turn away from a world that buys and sells happiness, to fully experience the luring whisper of your heart's truth. Why not today? Why not now? We are here and together at home in this evolving place, home in this ever-changing breath and body, home in this dewy morning, even as it reaches toward a hot, high noon. We hear the call from far beyond and deep within, and we do not hear it alone. Come, let us worship together. All right, and I should say too, this morning, I am Grace Cannon. I'm here with Ian Wallace, and we also have Sonia with us. And so we're just delighted to bring you the rest of this service, the three of us. I don't see any other announcements. So go ahead and send those in. We'll make those throughout the service. But I think that means we will go into the time for morning music.
Yes.
Great.
I am the fire that burns within your soul. I am the holy light that fills and makes you whole. I am the flame within that never dies. I am the sun that will ever arise. Power of the sun, honor you this night. Leap across the fire, keep all spirits bright. Power of the sun, fire in the night. Leave behind that which blinds to restore our sight. I am the fire that clears away the old. I am the holy light that guides you to your soul. I am the flame of love for which you yearn. I am the sun that will always return. Power of the sun, they honor you this night. Leap across the fire, keep all spirits bright. Power of the sun, fire in the night. Leave behind that which blinds to restore our sight. I am the fire that burns within your soul. I am the holy light that fills and makes you whole. I am the flame within that never dies. I am the sun that will ever arise. the sun, we honor you this night. Leap across the fire to keep our spirits bright. Power of the sun, fire in the night. Leave behind that which blinds to restore our sight. I am the fire that clears away the old. I am the holy light that guides you to your soul. I am the flame of love for which you yearn. I am the sun that will always return. Power of the sun, I honor you this night. Leap across the fire to keep our spirits bright. Power of the sun, fire in the night. Leave behind that which blinds to restore our sight.
Welcome back. Would like to put on an invitation for folks to start sending in joys and concerns. And in the meantime, I also just want to say that was Litha by Lisa Thiel, and that was the summer solstice song. So that's in honor of the summer solstice this weekend. So the next thing is to do the chalice lighting as we prepare for joys and concerns. And I think Ian will light for me as I read For the Web of Life by Reverend Paul Sprecher. That's how I want to say it. That might not be how he says it. We light this chalice for the web of life which sustains us, for the sacred circle of life in which we have our being, for the earth, the sky above and below, and for our Mother Earth, and for the mystery. All right.
I would like to light a candle. I don't know if it's joy or concern, but more bewilderment for all of our new friends across the region. A plague of moths.
You're not talking about all the people here for the summer.
No,
summering here.
The literal moths.
But the, yeah.
And maybe this is a candle to draw them in.
Draw them closer.
To draw them closer, yeah.
Would you light a candle for me in honor of Father's Day? Folks have been saying Happy Father's Day out there. And Happy Father's Day to all of the dads, for those that are being missed today and we're able to spend time with today as well. And then I think, was there an email there, Ian, that I should pull up too?
Cal sent me several joys and concerns.
Great.
You can start with...
Is this the one? Here. Okay, great. So from Cal, can we light a candle for a joy? He got bucked off a ladder at work on Tuesday and landed on the sidewalk on the left side of his back, which is about the springiest and most resilient place to land at such a time. But he broke some ribs. Definitely not any fun. We're thinking of you, Cal, with that. Let's see, was there a continuation? Definitely no fun, but also no shortage of transcendent experience. He went to the Y on Saturday morning to try to work for a couple hours just to see what he could do. Got pretty sore and grumpy and whiny trying to get out of the car without tweaking his busted ribs, but finally got out, stood up, and saw a young friend, Michael, walking in the front door of the Y to go to work. Michael has spent many years working with a walker and just recently got to the point where he can use a cane. He was happy to see Cal and talked about his great walk to work, about 1 block, which takes him around a half hour. He was also genuinely sympathetic about his busted ribs. Wow, light a candle for Michael, would ya? That's from Cal. Wow, Cal, we hope that you're feeling better. That's definitely not a fun experience.
Maybe one more from Cal.
That's the one I just read.
Oh, okay.
Is there another one?
I think that's it.
Okay. So then we have from Katherine Johnson, a joy and concern that racism is being discussed and hope that all of our lives will improve with equality.
Thanks, Catherine.
Yes, thank you. So from Bill, and he says this was from Michelle, actually. They're happy that their friend Steve will probably be released from the hospital this week. Wonderful. See if I'm missing anything and give folks a couple moments to send any last joys and concerns.
Just a concern for health and safety of people, that as our situation continues, that we're all mindful and careful to help stop the spread of the virus, even as others kind of give up on it. We can remain vigilant.
Absolutely. All right. I'm not seeing any others here, so we can light a final candle for any joys and concerns left unexpressed, but felt in our hearts. Thank you. All right, so that brings us to a meditation. I will read a meditation by Alice Walker, and that will be followed by a moment of silence, and we will sing Spirit of Life after that. My desire is always the same. Wherever life deposits me, I want to stick my toe, and soon my whole body, into the water. I want to shake out a fat broom and sweep dried leaves, bruised blossoms, dead insects, and dust. I want to grow something. It seems impossible that desire can sometimes transform into devotion. But this has happened. And that is how I've survived. How the whole I carefully tended in the garden of my heart grew a heart to fill it.
We laughed about whether or not Grace should introduce me. It's fine. I can very much relate to something Cal shared earlier this month about being really motivated by only having one day left to finish a talk. So I hope this is cogent and coherent. I've titled this talk, The Alienation of Transcendence. I wanted to be able to have a feel-good talk, some easy-to-digest inspirational message about how we can transcend racism, how we can go beyond humanity's tendencies toward othering, and pass into a realm above the exploitation and injustice that pervades our human world. But these are not feel-good times. In exploring the concept of transcendence in the summer of 2020, I feel obliged to begin by connecting this idea of going beyond with the reality of alienation that is front and center in the lives of those who are suffering. And as humans, we all suffer. In our suffering, we become distinctly aware of our separation from others. The individual self is the very thing that suffers. Awakening from the dream of suffering is a realization that the self is only a tiny shard refracting the interconnected web of creation. Alienation is the separation of the self from the world around it. An isolated, suffering self, alienated from its surroundings, forms the dynamic opposition to transcendent oneness. The truth is in a balance of the opposites. By accepting alienation itself, we find the key to transcendence. We dwell as subjects with a body, and it is this experience which carries us beyond the ordinary. In meditation, we become aware of our breath. Our brief lives are a liminal experience. We live for but a moment upon the threshold of the infinite. There is a paradox here. We are faced with an awareness of the catastrophe of the grave, and yet the opportunity for salvation presents itself in the midst of this loss. This salvation is the mystery of love. Within our own cultural context, there is a community of desperate hope and ardent resistance, the descendants of those women and men who were stolen from their homes in Africa. These are people whose bodies have been subjugated for generations. Their ongoing movement toward transcendence shows how people who are subject to brutal oppression have access to the most powerful form of love. To quote Cornel West, "The blues respond to the catastrophic with compassion, without drinking from the cup of bitterness." The Black community in the United States has demonstrated love, patience, persistence, tenacity, and compassion over the course of centuries of monstrous treatment. This is not merely in spite of the profound alienation experienced in the face of racism, but also as a result of it, as a result of the human spirit's hunger to overcome adversity. So this can't be a feel-good talk, at least not strictly so, because troubling truths
are being exposed in the process of transcending our old ways of being. Agreeing with the impetus for justice does not equate with the renunciation of white privilege. This is why I've titled the talk, The Alienation of Transcendence. It implies that in going beyond what we've known, we are cut off from the old comforts of our previous ignorance. It means that the movement above our previous levels of morality will almost certainly challenge our sense of self. To transcend racism, white people are being forced to call into question who we are, what we stand for, and how we operate in the world. We'll return to a discussion of the way that transcendence causes a sense of alienation from our assumed identities. But as a phrase, this title, The Alienation of Transcendence, won't get away without also having another meaning. In its second sense, it is transcendence which has been alienated from us. This odd sense of the phrase is my entry point for a discussion of how we got here. And as I'm always curious as to the evolutionary roots of our current predicament, I think that an examination of our deep history can give us insights into the constraining conceptions we have of our place in the world. Our ancestors in prehistory were organized in bands of a few dozen to a few hundred individuals. And groups of these bands were loosely associated with each other in tribes of a few thousand. The identity of an individual within this nexus corresponded with their biological success. Being known as a caring and useful individual within the band ensured that reciprocity and care would be given in return. Maintaining extended relationships within the wider tribe helped ensure the band's well-being into the future and provided opportunities for reproductive partners for the individual and their progeny. This paradigm arose organically from the behavioral patterns of our primate ancestors. Chimpanzees and bonobos have food-sharing behaviors similar to the reciprocity found within hunter-gatherer bands, and female chimps instinctively move to neighboring troops upon reaching sexual maturity. Language allowed for the development of more enduring, extended networks of relationships between bands, creating a broader space for the development of identity within the tribe. Here then is the opening of alienation within the community. The awareness of individuality allowed our ancestors to function within a complex, interconnected human world, while simultaneously prompting anxiety around their belonging within the group. This awareness of identity also developed into an anxiety concerning the group's contingency in the face of rival societies. Two radically different transcendent experiences emerged in the face of these anxieties. One was the collective ritual practices that form the anthropological underpinning of religion. The other is war. Religious rites developed to help individuals transcend the volatile forces that arise within a society when human desires clash. Imitation functions as the basis of learning, arguably the single most powerful plexus of human behavior. Through imitation, we learn what to desire. This mimetic desire, as René Girard termed it, demonstrates the inherent rivalry that naturally develops between individuals. In the articulated social structures of early human societies, the type of violent infighting seen among chimpanzees began to be subverted by ritualized behaviors. Scapegoating and the offering of sacrifices served to separate the locus of desire away from the individual. In order to transcend the violence of each other's animal presence, humanity began to alienate themselves from nature. Gods were initially placed firmly within the world, serving to inform and regulate the way human desire functioned. The gods and spirits dwelt within stones and the stars, the herbs and trees, the wind and water, the animals and the ancestors. The transcendent, numinous world of gods and spirits, demanding certain behaviors of human beings, alienated us from the web of creation. In no creation myth I am aware of are human beings considered as only one of the many animals. But always there is an alienation that separates the human being from the animal world. According to this theory of evolutionary psychology, our ancestors developed this sense of alienation from the world as a form of social regulation. Through the development of the imaginal, we learned to commend our desire unto a transcendent exterior pattern. This transcendent realm functioned within our thought processes in what psychologists term the superego. This long digression has felt necessary to explain the way that processes of alienation are fundamental to our ability to transcend the particular challenges we face. An individual dwelling with a sense of alienation from the world could transcend the crippling anxieties of consciousness by engaging in ritual practice. The rituals of hunter-gatherers formed foundational beliefs which allowed for the emergence of state power through the alienation of the individual from the transcendent divinity of the emperor. The appearance of the state in history also required the modulation of the warrior class to serve the emperor's needs. The intertribal warfare rooted in territorial contingency had developed within our ancient ancestors a transcendent sense of tribal identity. Elaborate rituals and ceremonies accompanying the carrying out of war pushed humans beyond their individual selves, subsumed them in the identity of the tribe. The alienation of the rival tribe is as deeply rooted as any aspect of human evolution. Here we find the recurrent presence of what Deleuze and Guattari describe as a war machine. And by machine, they don't mean something made out of metal. They mean a system of behaviors, which is inherent within human psychology and society. And this war machine operates to alienate an other, and through opposition to the other, coordinate a collective identity that pushes beyond the confines of our isolation as individuals. In modernity, capitalism itself can be seen as a form of war machine, alienating the other of the laborer from the collective identity embodied in consumerism. Rooted in the acts of war performed between tribes over the course of hundreds of millennia, the evolution of the war machine also created the prerequisite force that function to facilitate the development of the state. Empires were able to evolve through the correspondence of religious beliefs and the political efforts to regulate humanity's warlike stance against the alienated exteriority. Although the war machine always functions outside the full control of the state, which, just as an aside, really makes me think about how much are we actually in control of the police as a society. That's an aside. Key to the function of the war machine is the alienation of the exterior other. Between hunter-gatherer tribes, the opposing force is denigrated and dehumanized through chants and songs that warriors use to prepare themselves for combat. The objectification and animalization of the other continued to function throughout history in the following contexts: between armies, between captors and slaves, between colonizers and indigenous peoples, between police and subjugated populations. So now we have the building blocks of what Bell Hooks terms the white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. Transcending whiteness is then also a process of transcending the entire paradigm of state power and capitalism. Where to begin? The first 6 of the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism show that transcending this current paradigm is something that we value as a community. I believe then that the 7th principle is what might bring us full circle: respect for the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are a part. The transcendence of our animal limits was obtained by means of the devil's own bargain. Through processes of alienation, we propelled ourselves into global domination. What would respect for the interdependent web of all existence look like? I believe that processes of alienation are not only inherent within humanity, but are produced from fundamental antagonisms within existence. Respect for the web of all existence must then include the healthy respect for the many challenges and problems which face us as beings. Thus, transcending our role in systems of oppression does not imply that we are delivering ourselves into a world without problems. Alienating ourselves from our assumed identities is uncomfortable, but a necessary step in moving into a world beyond injustice. Transcending patriarchy means alienating ourselves from identification with cultural normalization surrounding what men and women are supposed to be. Transcending capitalism means that instead of being alienated from the products of our labor, we alienate ourselves from the void of meaninglessness by meeting the challenges posed by our curiosity, by our innate need to find a meaningful place and purposeful activity in the world. The antagonistic nature of life will continue. But by going beyond systems of exploitation, we can find intrinsic worth in our productive activity and address the contingency of our material well-being through communal responsibility. Transcending racism means that our interpersonal and societal challenges must be met with a deeper level of presence and compassion, which leaves no room for historically rooted injustices. we must understand and alienate ourselves from inherited patterns of privilege. It doesn't mean that we won't continue to struggle with interpersonal and societal challenges, but the respect for our interconnectedness can guide us through the process of healing wounds which have long gone untended. The work of white Americans to transcend racism is to pass out of themselves, to leave our identities behind, and live the love and justice we wish to see. Transcendence is going to take the ongoing work of being aware of our anxieties and practicing compassion in our relations with others. There will always be problems to transcend, but at this moment in history, it is apparent that we have a particular responsibility to let go of white privilege. Perhaps the feel-good message wins out in the end, because as we alienate ourselves from our unconscious roles within paradigms of subjugation, we are engaging in the ongoing process of transcendence that is central to being human.
Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way. On the road from greed to giving, love will guide us through the dark night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. You are like no other being. What you can give, no other can give. To the future of our precious children, to the future of the world where we live. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way. On the road from greed to giving, love will guide us through the dark night. Hear the song of peace within you. Heed the song of peace in your heart. Spring's new beginning will lead to the harvest. Love will guide us on our way, on our way. Love will guide us, peace has tried us. Hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the dark night.
Okay, we hope you enjoyed singing along with the hymn, Love Will Guide Us. And now it's time for the offering.
Let this be an offering to sustain and strengthen this place, which is so sacred to many of us, a community of memory and of hope, for we are the keepers of the dream.
There's a link to the Tithely website where you can make a donation online. You may also, if you're able, make a donation via check. You can make the check payable to Ramona Stein, UUFS Treasurer, and you can, well, I guess you would make it payable to UUFS, excuse me, and then you can mail it to Ramona Stein, UUFS Treasurer, at 1590 Sugarland Drive, number B-206, Sheridan, Wyoming, 82801. That's her address. That's where you can send that. Okay, and so it is time for a closing reading before we move into the discussion of Ian's wonderful talk. Thank you, Ian, for delivering that. Our closing reading today is called Because of Those Who Came Before We Are by Reverend Barbara J. Peskin. Because of those who came before we are, in spite of their failings, we believe. Because of and in spite of the horizons of their vision, we too dream. Let us go remembering to praise, to live in the moment, to love mightily, to bow to the mystery. And now I'll invite Ian back up.
I'm not sure there are any comments or questions yet.
You're in the hot seat.
Maybe that's a bad sign.
Well, Catherine Johnson said, fantastic talk, Ian.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you. I'll talk to you, Ian.
Okay.
We can have a discussion.
All right.
So I was thinking just now about the way in which you describe the othering, the sort of like evolutionary beginnings of othering. And I wanted to ask, is that sort of sets up what you were, that's like the underpinnings of like the state, right? Because I was also thinking in the context of things like racism and all that like this othering comes into play as well. But if I understood it and I followed it correctly, you were sort of like showing the ways in which like the state becomes established to sort of alienate the people that make up the state.
One of the big mysteries in anthropology is how states and empires arose. And it doesn't ever seem to be quite simple enough to just say there was agriculture, and then to protect the grain bins, states arose. Like that's sort of true, but certainly there's a sense of identity, and the state always functions in opposition to an exteriority and an othering of those who aren't within the state. Mm-hmm. And it may certainly, almost certainly, it predates what we see as racism, but I think it's rooted in a very similar aspect of
Mm-hmm.
human evolution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it was sparking in me. I was listening to a podcast called Seeing White, and
Sonia's blowing bubbles over here. It's not distracting at all. She made the bubble mix herself. Fabulous. Well done, Sonia.
But I was thinking about how among white folks, I feel like there's like a common understanding of what racism is, like some kind of conception of it, which is just that, like, it's like almost human nature to other people, and that's like what racism is just like seeing people as others, and not in the full context of like a very active exploitation of a group of people that were not, maybe didn't even rise to the level of something like a rivalry, but was just here's some people we can exploit. And
I would say, yeah, that you're absolutely right. There's something very evolutionary. Yeah, evolutionary psychology can really quickly be turned to explain that things are this way just because that's the way humans are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that can be very dangerous. Victor's calling me.
Did something happen?
Are you there? Do you want to make a comment? Okay, let me finish my thought, and then I'll let you jump in. So this idea that something very natural did evolve within humanity in terms of territorial groups of primate humans interfacing with each other upon river boundaries, across ridge tops. And this was a very natural and instinctual struggle for resources between groups of primates. But then, through the arc of the imaginal and the development of our consciousness, we transcended animal ways of being, but those tools were then turned against humanity itself by people in positions of power. And that's why that point that I make about capitalism being the alienation of the worker from the product, and the transcendence is the availability of the product to all consumers. Well, in so many cases, the worker is also a consumer, and you can see how, like, why capitalism is so nefarious but also so successful is that it alienates us from ourselves, right? That it actually pits us against ourselves. Where you see people working against their own best interests or working in ways that are unhealthy, and yet they seem to have no other options. So that it's the idea that the war machine is a technology which the emergence of empire attempts to harness in order to further its own power. Yeah, lots of thoughts on that. Go ahead, Victor.
So first, Ian, thank you very much for connecting our theme along with what's happening in the world. So the idea that white supremacy is a form of alienation, that's a very important point that you made. I wanted to also add the idea that the transcendentalists who promoted the idea of transcendence, they weren't original with that, but they were also, at the same time that they were seeking for humans to connect with the natural world and with other humans, and to move beyond the sense of the alienated self, they also were strong advocates for abolition, for women's rights, for public education. So I just wanted to connect what you brought in with the UU tradition, especially the transcendentalists. So those are my thoughts on it. And I'm sorry I couldn't chat. Again, I'm still having chat trouble. But thanks.
No, thank you for calling, Victor. And I think that, like, I'm really glad that you bring the transcendental tradition back up, because I think that, you know, for us younger folks, I guess I can still claim that. I'm still 35. I'm a youth, for like 5 more months. That it seems like, you know, someone like Emerson was so long ago, and all of their efforts and the hard work of the abolitionists made great changes, but here we still are in this predicament of subjugation and exploitation. It's ongoing. But we had a great conversation with some of Grace's old friends the other night, and they kept mentioning, you know, all of this, the last few hundred years are just a blink of the eye in terms of the grander history, even of the human species. And so I think you're absolutely right to bring up the transcendentalist tradition and the spirit of working for justice, that they may have started it, and we definitely are called to carry it on. There's still a lot of hard work to do. And I think, I guess the point of my talk is that moving on to the next step of the process is going to have to involve giving up a sense of identity that we like to pretend we don't even have to be aware of in many cases, even if in other cases we're all too aware of it.
I have another thing here, Ian. So Matt asked, what are Grace and Ian's thoughts about current discussions about systemic racism? How do they bounce off the ideas in Ian's talk today? Which is like a really large question, and it's your talk, so I'd love for you to draw connections, but I could also just provide like
thoughts on systemic racism.
Yeah, well, just the idea that it made me think of recently, was it the Merriam-Webster dictionary that changed their definition of racism? And it was due to the work of a young woman of color, a young Black woman, who said, this needs updating. Racism needs to be understood within the context of the many systems that are, that make up our society. So whether it's education or healthcare or food systems or the criminal justice system, you can point to any one of those, and in this country, see the ways in which people of color and Black folks are disproportionately disadvantaged and oppressed.
I would say, just speaking from a perspective as an educator, that this idea that we can't do anything about educational funding because it's all based on these mill levies of property taxes, that's a pretty firmly entrenched position of white privilege. And it's easy for us to say, yep, nothing we can do about it, when we benefit tremendously from it, especially here in a place like Sheridan, where, we have the homes of many millionaires and billionaires here, and that benefits our school system. Whereas so many communities of color, due to historical alienation, don't have the resources to fund the kind of education which would open up opportunities for those children to innovate and explore their full potential. So there's a systemic issue, right? And this idea that nothing can be done about it because this is just the way that things are, is something that we might have to let go of our privilege as individuals living in a community who benefit from that systemic racism. I think I have more thoughts on that, but we might want to wrap it up. Cal has also reached out with a message here. He says, thank you for the great talk, and he would like to read it at some point. And I'll make sure I get that to Ramona in a timely manner so she can post it on the website. He says, just a quick comment. It seems that the more we experience fear and discomfort, the stronger the impulse to other in order to increase our tribal security. And the more our responses become both destructive and short-sighted. All of which makes it more critical to be respectful of and truly see our immersion in the interdependence of our web, both systemically and on a personal level. Yeah, I think I see what you're saying here, Cal, and I think it's a great point about fear and discomfort. And I think sort of then the flip side of that, which you're bringing up, is this idea of respecting our interconnection with everything. And maybe the next step in, developing a society that's more healthy is alienating ourselves from anxiety itself, right? Which is like, there's a tall order.
Can I offer you one other thing, Ian? I know we want to wrap up. It just made me think of intersectionality and this idea of alienation, that like we are the sum of all the parts, that you can separate, our racialized identities from our gendered identities that have been assumed in whatever way, and that like there's a big push towards intersectionality, which is to like accept the ways in which all of these components are interconnected and impact each other, and how, in a way, I'm seeing that now as a form of transcendence, that there's like in intersectionality, there's the goal of like rising above the boxes that are the different parts of us to like the complete wholeness, and to sort of take that in consideration. So, there's systemic racism, but there's systemic oppression of many kinds, and if we can begin to understand how they are all interconnected, maybe we have that chance to transcend so many of the isms and the whiteness.
You're here.
Okay, Katherine Johnson says, equality starts with equal education. Vote for politicians who get that. Barbara Walter says, thank you, Grace and Ian. It was good to be with you today. Happy Father's Day, Ian. I hope you have something special coming up now that you have shared with us and made our day much nicer.
Well, thank you, Barbara. Okay. Have a wonderful Father's Day and happy weekend. We'll now extinguish the chalice. Momentarily. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment. Oh, I might have forgot how the part goes at the end. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Okay, bye. Thank you. Bye.